Alrighty, you guys, well, thanks so much for coming to the Twister Legacy Sequel Title Planning Committee meeting. We're going to get into, right now, the title itself. Alright, what are some ideas? What do we got from the peanut gallery? We got Twister 2, Twist Again. That's not enough. What was that? Twisted? Awful. What did you say, Todd? Twisters? Genius! What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and today we're getting into all of my spoiler-free thoughts on Twisters. That's right, the legacy sequel to the 1996 classic, Twister. See what they did there? The plural? Anyway, huge thank you to Universal Pictures for giving me the chance to watch this in a Dolby Cinema theater early for review, and trust me, I'll tell you why it is worth it to pay for XD if you're at Cinemark, or Dolby Cinema if you're at AMC. It's unreal. But guys, the film itself is in theaters, so you can check it out on July 19th. So when you do, let me know down below in the comments what you think, and hey, if you like movie reviews just like this, hit the big red button below and subscribe to the channel for that and much more as the year goes on. It's summer movie season, guys. We're talking 2 Twisters here, okay? It's getting fun. Now, the film itself is directed by someone who I revere as a director because he directed Minari, my favorite movie of 2020. That's right, Isaac Chung. Oh my gosh, he was so good, and the director's chair for that film. So I was excited to see what he would deliver here, even though I didn't love the idea of the movie. Now, the cast itself is relatively sort of stacked, sort of. It's an ensemble, but it's got some awesome leads. We have Daisy Edgar-Jones playing Kate, Glen Powell as Tyler, that's right, Glen Powell himself, and Anthony Ramos as Javi. Also, a little shout out here to Brandon Perea, who plays Boone. I don't know, I just really like this character, so I wanted to give him a shout out here. Now, the movie itself, the premise is a little bit simple, sort of, but let me just break it down for you without spoiling anything. Twisters is all about Kate, a retired tornado chaser who returns to Oklahoma after a great tragedy. She then encounters a meteorologist named Tyler from Arkansas who challenges her and poses the question, what are you chasing? Now, the movie itself, again, a legacy sequel, so I was wondering, how does it differentiate itself from the 1996 film? And thankfully, it surprised me in the best way possible. So, without further ado, let's get right into my positives and start at the top with exactly what I said. I surprisingly enjoyed this movie. I came out of Twisters smiling and thinking, I need to add the soundtrack to my Apple Music library, but also how much of a fun time I had at the movies. I do feel like this is that summertime film that works so darn good in a theatrical setting, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but I honestly am really blown away, no pun intended, by the big action sequences, but also the personal, intimate touch that director Isaac Chung brings to the film. He doesn't try to bombard audiences with a ton of callbacks to the original. I think there are maybe 2 callbacks at most, but Twisters is largely its own movie, which is why it works so darn well. Of course, on the surface, everyone's coming to this movie for the big VFX spectacle, which they should, because it actually was pretty good. It was solid, sure. CGI was noticeable in some instances, but for the most part, I actually loved what they did with each and every action moment. But underneath that surface is a movie that is relatable with its story, and I liked it. It even encourages the audience that if you feel strongly about something or someone, chase it or them. And I like that overarching theme for this film. But none of that really works without the charisma of our leads. 3 in particular, of course. You have Glen Powell, Daisy Edgar-Jones, and Anthony Ramos. Now for me, Glen Powell is the next big Hollywood star. He just oozes on-screen presence, and I love how he elevates Twisters whenever he's present. And it helps that he's given a lot of flexibility in this role because he plays Tyler Owens, a retired meteorologist who's now chasing tornadoes with his friends on YouTube, and it works really well. And the moment he makes his first appearance, it almost is as if the rest of his co-stars are also on that same wavelength because their performances are aided, but of course, Twisters is more so a vehicle for one actor in particular, and that's Daisy Edgar-Jones. She's playing Kate, and this is a movie that is giving her a chance to showcase her talent. Now, I saw her in Where the Crawdads Sing for the first time, and I thought she was not very good in that movie. And the movie itself is very bad as well. So I thought, okay, let me not think about that and pretend like this is the first time I'm seeing Daisy Edgar-Jones. And man, was her performance here so much better than in Where the Crawdads Sing. She turns in a solid performance, and I don't think she does anything to hurt the experience of the film, even though maybe her crying moments aren't so convincing, but she is able to take home the message of what it means to find your passion again. And you can tell she's having fun with Glen Powell. Like, both of them actually have really good back and forth in this movie. But there's also Anthony Ramos, who plays Javi, who was with Kate, 5 years prior to when we see Kate in present day in this movie. So yes, there's a time skip, which is a little jarring, not too much, but in the beginning, we see Javi, Kate, and all their friends, and then 5 years later, right? But Javi is still around. So Anthony Ramos does get a fair deal of screen time in this film, and I do think he makes the best of it. He's got this impeccable comedic timing that I know and you know has worked in the past, and it works here again. And I like the dynamic with him and the rest of his co-stars. There are some instances where I'm like, are you diving into a romantic subplot here with Javi? It's odd because they don't really go any further than just maybe mentioning it, but for the most part, he does well with the material given. So now I want to talk about the theatrical experience for Twisters and why it is very important to see this in a theater. The film lends itself greatly to being in a dark room with the projector on and the speakers going nuts, okay? Because this is a movie you feel. Yeah, you watch it, but you feel the bass when there's a tornado coming by. You are able to experience every single raindrop, even though the water's not coming down. I don't know about 40x. A friend in this critic space, Josie, said 40x is insane, but I do think that this movie would not have played so well for me if I saw it at home for the first time. So your first watch, I do encourage you to go and see it in a theater, because it just aids the overall experience, especially in action moments where the CGI is completely noticeable, but the sound design is just excellent. So I loved what they did here with the movie. And speaking of things you hear, the music in this movie is awfully good, and I didn't expect it to be as good as it was. The original soundtrack sets the table for so many scenes, and at first I thought, oh, they're just licensing individual singles. No, there's a whole entire concept album for Twisters. It's probably available by the time you're watching this on streaming platforms. I'm still waiting for the full version of Leon Bridges' song because he's excellent, okay, and the song sounded so good in the theater, but I do think what we hear just helps this movie quite a bit. I love, I believe the name is Lainey Wilson, her song Out of Oklahoma. It's a banger, and it works so well in the context and out of the context for this film and this experience. But it's not all about that original soundtrack. The composer here, Benjamin Wallfish, who did compose Blade Runner 2049, if I'm not mistaken, does a good to great job at times. Sure, there are some moments where it's a little hokey and you hear this overbearing electric guitar, but I think that might have been on purpose. Even if it wasn't, it's not enough to get me out of this experience. I'm still immersed because of both the score and the original soundtrack. Okay, so that's what I loved about the movie, but there were some negatives here that at times made me scratch my head. And no, I'm not going to bring up character decisions. Yeah, there are some dumb characters in this movie, like when they go to a rest stop. Guys, they go to a rest stop and they're like, it's not a tornado, it's not. And then the wall blows over and it's like, oh, okay, maybe it's a tornado now. And then they get in their car. What do you think happens next? But I want to talk about technically what the negatives were for me in this movie, and it is the script, okay? It's not very strong. While there are a lot of cheesy moments like I mentioned, that's to be expected for a summer blockbuster, so it's fine. But I do feel like screenwriter Mark L. Smith and the director here, Lee Isaac Chung, weren't clicking. While the director, right, is adding a personal touch, the script itself feels very detached, especially with the dialogue from what the characters are going through. This is honestly a thin script, and we see the holes in the script bleed through in the second act, and this is where the movie is supposed to hit hard, but it falls flat. One example, without spoiling anything, is when Kate and her mom have a conversation in Oklahoma. You'll know what scene I'm talking about, and it was incredibly lacking. Like, wait a second. 5 years later, this is the first time y'all have reunited in a very long time, and this is the result? Like, they're just picking up like nothing happened? Come on, man. That was a moment to have a very intentional conversation between mother and daughter, but the movie sort of skirts over that. So that does damage the character development for Kate, but the story overall doesn't always have a firm direction, so it gets a bit lost, which hurts everyone in the movie, especially when they introduce some subplots that you would think would be very interesting, like romantic subplots, and they go nowhere fast. Maybe they went up the tornado, I don't know, but that was a missed opportunity for me, and you can definitely feel that in the final product. Now, this next drawback for the film is something that, well, isn't a deal breaker, but it's definitely noticeable. Sometimes the acting from our cast leaves a lot to be desired. Like I mentioned, Daisy Edgar-Jones for the most part is on point in this movie. She doesn't do anything awful, she's not doing anything great, but she's solid, right? She's good. But when she is crying in this movie, or when there's an emotional moment and the camera's getting tighter on her face, I felt nothing. It was completely flat for me, and that's an issue, and I think that's maybe a part of her acting arsenal that needs to be refined a bit, because she's 0 for 2 in the crying department. When she was getting emotional in Where the Crawdads Sing, it did not work for me, and it doesn't work for me here either in Twisters. She has fun for the most part and is able to go blow for blow with Glen Powell, but you can tell in those emotional moments where the emotional beats are trying to, of course, manifest themselves in Daisy Edgar-Jones, she's just like, I'm doing my best, and unfortunately in this movie it wasn't great and wasn't good enough. And while I also enjoy the supporting cast, like I mentioned, Boone is a cool character and he's hilarious, I do think there are certain moments that come across as disingenuous. It's almost as if the script is forcing this dialogue that sounds unnatural to these characters, and unfortunately the actors don't do the greatest job with that weak material at times. Like, there's a character, I think her name is Lily, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the drone operator for Tyler Owens' crew, and she says things that I'm like, okay, I'm used to hearing this dialogue because it is very much a generational colloquialism, but it didn't work in the way she delivered it. So the execution was really poor and quite jarring at times, because I'm thinking, did you say that? But why did it sound so weird to me? But overall, you guys, what did I think of Twisters? Well, I'm coming away actually really enjoying this film. Yeah, it's not a 5 out of 5, right? But this movie is gonna make you feel better about this movie season simply for the fun you're gonna have with Twisters. Sure, it's not for everybody. If you're coming in looking for an Oscar-worthy film, I know that term is so exhausting by now, but you're not gonna get that, right? This movie has its drawbacks. There are holes in the script, and the director and the screenwriter aren't always clicking, but the leads at least have enough chemistry together, and they have an insane amount of charisma to make this a worthwhile experience. And I loved being in the middle of these tornadoes, literally in the middle of these tornadoes, with the characters that we have, like Tyler Owens and Kate and Javi. It's a lot of fun, and there is a decent message. It's a feel-good type of movie by the end, and yeah, I came away thinking, this was 2 hours well spent. And I'm really glad I get to tell you guys you should see it in theaters, because if this wasn't a theatrical experience, I wouldn't lie to you. But you do need to see this one in a dark room with an audience that's gonna laugh, it's gonna gasp, and that's gonna have a fun time right along with you. So if I had to rate this one, guys, it's getting a solid 4 out of 5 for me, because I really liked what we got. Now, is it going to be in the middle of the pack this movie season? Quite possibly, but this is a weak movie season, so I don't know. Maybe it will be in the top tier, but for now, it's coming in my top 10, I think, right at the tail end of my top 10, but I really enjoyed what we got with Twisters, and when I see it again, I probably would. Yeah. I wanted popcorn so bad, but I was at AMC, not Cinemark, so it made me so upset. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and get loud in the comments, and let me know, which one do you like better, Twister or Twisters? Hey, if we get a third one, it'll be Twisted again. Too fast, too twistiest? We're going with the Fast and Furious moniker, whatever. But guys, thanks again for watching. Thanks for tuning in. God bless you guys, and I'll catch you at the next screening. Remind me, Siri, remind me, I'm not moving to Oklahoma. Yeah, put that in my reminder for like my life.